A father takes his two young sons to a supervised visit. The social worker brings the children to the door. The father pulls them inside, slams the door shut, and within minutes, the house explodes in flames. Both children, ages 5 and 7, are dead. So is their father. But this isn't where our story begins. This horrific ending was just the final act in a case that had already consumed investigators for over 2 years. Because 15 years ago, on a snowy December evening in Utah, a young mother named Susan Cox Powell vanished without a trace. And just 2 weeks ago, investigative journalists made a discovery that changes everything we thought we knew about how she died. Susan Powell wasn't just another missing person. She was a 28-year-old mother of 2 who had been desperately trying to save her marriage while secretly documenting her fears that her husband might kill her. She had written a will stating, "If I die, it may not be an accident, even if it looks like one." She had recorded videos of property damage she said her husband Josh had caused during violent outbursts. She had confided to friends that she feared for her safety. On December 6, 2009, Susan attended church with her 2 young sons, Charlie and Braden. That afternoon, her neighbor Giovanna Owings came over for lunch. Josh had made pancakes. Susan told Giovanna she was tired and wanted to rest. Giovanna left around 5:30 p.m. She was the last person besides Josh Powell to ever see Susan alive. What Josh claimed happened next defied all logic. He said that after midnight, in freezing temperatures, he decided to take his 2 toddlers camping in Utah's remote West Desert. He claimed Susan stayed home because she was tired. When Susan failed to show up for work the next morning and the children didn't arrive at daycare, family members called police. Josh returned home with the boys around 5 p.m. the following day, more than 17 hours after he claimed to have left for this spontaneous camping trip. When police questioned 4-year-old Charlie about the trip, the child made a statement that would haunt investigators for years. He said his mommy had gone camping with them, but stayed behind where the crystals are. The police immediately knew something was wrong. Susan's purse, wallet, cell phone, and car keys were all at home. 2 box fans were running, pointed at a wet spot on the couch as if someone had been trying to dry up a liquid. Josh's story kept changing. He couldn't remember exactly where they had camped. He had wet socks in his van, but claimed they had been camping in the snow. But it was what police found when they searched Josh's minivan that would become the most crucial piece of evidence in the case. Hidden in a floor compartment was a garbage bag containing something investigators had never seen before in a missing person case. Inside that bag were chunks of melted metal, charred wire fragments, burned pieces of drywall, a few screws, and a screwdriver bit. The metal had been heated to such extreme temperatures that it was completely unrecognizable. The FBI analyzed it and could only confirm it was predominantly steel, with traces of calcium and strontium. For 15 years, that melted metal remained one of the biggest mysteries in the case. Police theorized it might have been Susan's cell phone, a GPS device, or a computer hard drive that Josh had destroyed to cover his tracks. But they could never prove what it was, until 2 weeks ago. The Cold Podcast, an investigative series that has spent years examining the Susan Powell case, conducted an experiment that finally solved this 15-year-old mystery. And what they discovered suggests that Josh Powell didn't just destroy evidence. He destroyed what was likely the murder weapon. Here's what the Cold team figured out. In the weeks before Susan's disappearance, Josh had purchased an oxyacetylene cutting torch from an industrial supply store called Airgas. The store employee, Andrew Robinson, remembered Josh well because his behavior had been so strange. Josh initially told Robinson he wanted the torch for making jewelry, claiming he needed to do light welding. But what he actually purchased was a heavy-duty cutting torch capable of slicing through half-inch steel. Robinson thought it was complete overkill for jewelry making. When Josh returned a week later, complaining the equipment didn't work, Robinson provided him with much larger fuel tanks. Just over a week later, Robinson saw Josh on the news as a person of interest in his wife's disappearance. Police photos taken the day after Susan vanished show the torch in Josh's garage with blackening on the tip, proving it had been used between the time he returned from his supposed camping trip and when he met with detectives. There was also a burn spot on the garage floor, a fire extinguisher nearby, and a red gas can. The Cold team realized that all of Josh's power tools were accounted for in police photos and his personal pictures after Susan's disappearance, except for one. A rigid impact driver from a tool set he owned was missing, so they bought an identical impact driver from 2007 and subjected it to the same oxyacetylene torch Josh had used. After 45 minutes of intense heat, what remained looked remarkably similar to the melted metal police had found in Josh's van. But here's the crucial detail that makes this discovery so significant. The wire fragments found with the melted metal were 12 AWG copper wire, 2 to 3 inches long. That's exactly the type and length of wire found inside a rigid impact driver. The strontium detected in the metal analysis is commonly used in small electric motors, exactly like those found in cordless power tools. Andrew Robinson, the Airgas employee who sold Josh the torch, didn't believe Josh had planned to destroy a power tool when he made the purchase. But the evidence suggests that's exactly what happened. And Robinson raised the terrifying possibility of why someone would go to such extreme lengths to destroy a tool. "Why would you destroy something like that?" Robinson said. "It's quite feasible that the destruction of that was involved somehow in Susan's demise." In other words, the melted metal that police found wasn't just evidence that Josh had destroyed something. It was likely evidence that he had destroyed the weapon he used to kill his wife. If this case is gripping you as much as it's gripped me, and you want to see justice for Susan and her children, make sure you're subscribed because we're about to dive into the chilling details of how Josh Powell planned this crime and the horrifying lengths he went to cover it up. This story gets darker, and the evidence gets stronger. The timeline of Josh's actions that night becomes even more damning when you understand what the evidence shows he was really doing. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. This was a calculated plan that he had been preparing for weeks. Remember, Josh bought that cutting torch on November 24, 2009. Susan disappeared on December 6th. That gave him nearly 2 weeks to plan exactly how he would destroy the evidence. The large fuel tanks he acquired when he returned to Airgas meant he had enough acetylene and oxygen to completely obliterate a metal object. But something went wrong with his plan. Police believe Josh initially tried to burn the impact driver using gasoline in his garage, which explains the burn spot on the concrete floor and the gas can found nearby. When that didn't completely destroy the tool, he switched to the cutting torch. The combination of fire and torch created the distinctive speckled gray and white appearance of the melted metal, as the tool became coated with gypsum from the burned drywall. The fact that Josh hid the melted remains in his van suggests he planned to dispose of them far from his home, somewhere police would never think to search. But he never got the chance. Police found the evidence before he could complete his plan. This revelation about the impact driver fundamentally changes our understanding of Susan's murder. It suggests this wasn't a crime of passion or a domestic dispute that got out of hand. This was premeditated murder with a calculated plan to destroy the evidence. But Josh Powell's crimes didn't end with killing his wife. What he did to his own children would shock the world and reveal the true depth of his evil. The investigation into Susan's disappearance quickly zeroed in on Josh Powell, but building a prosecutable case proved nearly impossible. Despite mountains of circumstantial evidence, prosecutors refused to file charges without a body. Detective Ellis Maxwell, who led the investigation, was frustrated by the legal constraints. "There's a pile of circumstantial evidence," Maxwell said. "Is there enough there to arrest him and book him into jail and hold him accountable?" "Absolutely there is. Could we?" "No." Meanwhile, Josh moved with the children to his father Stephen Powell's house in Washington State. This decision would prove to be another nightmare for the Cox family, because Stephen Powell was just as disturbed as his son. Stephen had developed an obsessive infatuation with Susan. He had secretly videotaped her in the bathroom using a small mirror, stolen her underwear, read her private journals, and even posted love songs about her online. After Susan's disappearance, Stephen created a website claiming she had run away with another man due to mental illness. But Stephen's obsession went beyond Susan. Police discovered he had been secretly recording young neighborhood girls and women for years. In September 2011, he was arrested on voyeurism and child pornography charges. During his trial, Stephen invoked his Fifth Amendment right when asked about Susan's disappearance, but investigators believed he knew exactly what had happened to her. The family court system, however, continued to allow Josh supervised visits with Charlie and Braden, despite the mounting evidence against him and his father's arrest. Susan's parents, Chuck and Judy Cox, fought desperately for custody, but the court seemed to prioritize Josh's parental rights over the children's safety. In early 2012, new evidence emerged that would finally force the court's hand. A laptop from Josh Powell's Utah home contained images of cartoon pornography. A judge then ordered Josh Powell to undergo a psychosexual evaluation and take a polygraph test. Josh knew his time was running out. The evidence was mounting. The courts were finally taking action, and his carefully constructed lies were falling apart. So he made one final, unthinkable decision. On February 5, 2012, a social worker brought Charlie and Braden to Josh's rental house in Graham, Washington, for what was supposed to be a supervised visit. The boys, now 5 and 7 years old, were excited to see their father. They had no idea what he was planning. The moment the social worker brought the children to the door, Josh pulled them inside and slammed it shut, locking her out. She could smell gasoline almost immediately and began pounding on the door, screaming for the children. Within minutes, the house exploded in flames. The official cause of death for Joshua and the 2 boys was determined to be carbon monoxide poisoning, though the coroner also noted that both children had significant chopping injuries on the head and neck. A hatchet was recovered near Joshua's body, and investigators believe he used the tool to attack the boys before being overwhelmed by smoke and fumes. Josh had attacked his own children with a hatchet, then ignited gasoline throughout the house to ensure none of them would survive. This case shows us how the system can fail the most vulnerable victims. If you believe children deserve better protection from dangerous parents, hit that like button and share this story. Charlie and Braden's deaths led to important legal changes, but only because people refused to let their story be forgotten. The murder-suicide sent shockwaves through both Washington and Utah. We have been robbed of 3 precious lives, and it's just devastating to think the same person did it, Denise Cox Ernest, Susan Powell's sister, told ABC affiliate Como TV in 2012. But the Cox family refused to let their tragedy be in vain. They sued Washington State's Child Welfare Agency for negligence in allowing the supervised visits to continue despite the obvious danger Josh posed. They won a roughly $100 million lawsuit against Washington's State Child Welfare Agency after accusing agency leadership and staff of negligence. More importantly, their advocacy led to legislative changes designed to protect other children. In 2024, the Utah legislature passed HB 272, commonly called Alms Law, to reform the state's family court system. The law now requires courts to consider evidence of domestic violence and other forms of abuse when making child custody decisions. The case has continued to generate new insights and evidence even 15 years later. The Cold podcast has spent years investigating every aspect of Susan's disappearance, uncovering previously unreported evidence and interviewing key witnesses who had never spoken publicly before. Because forensic interviews are audio and video recorded, those recordings may be used as evidence in criminal prosecutions rather than forcing a child to testify in open court. The podcast has also revealed how Charlie Powell's statements to police provided crucial clues about where Susan's body might be located. Charlie had told investigators that his mother was where the crystals are, leading to extensive searches in Utah's Dugway geode beds and Topaz Mountain area. In early 2022, a cave exploration crew, led by Diesel Brothers personality Dave Sparks, took up the challenge of searching a mine shaft in the Utah desert in search of Susan's remains. The team discovered several rib bones, possible human vertebrae, scraps of clothing, and other possible evidence of human remains in the mine shaft. The remains were sent to a lab, with DNA tests concluding that none of the bones belonged to Powell, but were instead animal remains. Despite these continued search efforts, Susan's body has never been found. West Valley City Police closed their active investigation into Susan's disappearance in May 2013, stating their belief that Joshua killed Susan and that his brother Michael, who died by suicide in February 2013, aided him in concealing her body. Stephen Powell, Josh's father, died in custody in 2020 while serving time for his voyeurism convictions, taking whatever secrets he knew about Susan's fate to his grave. The recent identification of the melted impact driver represents the most significant breakthrough in the case in over a decade. It provides the missing piece of the puzzle about how Susan was killed and demonstrates the calculated nature of Josh's crime. This case serves as a stark reminder of how domestic violence can escalate to murder and how the legal system's failure to act decisively can have devastating consequences. Susan Powell tried to protect herself and document the danger she faced. She left behind evidence of her fears and Josh's controlling behavior, but it wasn't enough to save her or her children. The Susan Powell case changed how we think about domestic violence, child custody, and the warning signs of escalating abuse. If this story has affected you, please share it to keep Susan's memory alive and help protect other families facing similar dangers. Every share could help save a life. Today, Susan would have been 43 years old, Charlie would be 19, and Braden would be 17. Instead, their lives were cut short by a man who chose violence over accountability, murder over divorce, and revenge over love. Susan Powell's story doesn't end with her disappearance. It lives on in the laws that now protect children, the investigators who refuse to give up, and the family who continues to seek justice. Her case reminds us that behind every missing person statistic is a real person with hopes, dreams, and people who love them. The search for Susan Powell may be cold, but it will never be forgotten. Two 15-year-old twin sisters walk into a gas station on a quiet Sunday afternoon in Augusta, Georgia. They buy chips, candy, and soda. The clerk knows them well, notices nothing unusual. They walk out together, never to be seen again. But here's what makes this case absolutely chilling. Within a year, police closed the case claiming the girls were found. The family never sees them. 3 years later, their names are mysteriously removed from the National Missing Children database. For over 2 decades, it's as if Danette and Jeanette Millbrook never existed. March 18, 1990. That's the date that would forever shatter the Millbrook family and expose one of the most disturbing examples of investigative negligence in American history. This isn't just another missing persons case. This is the story of how 2 black teenage girls disappeared from their neighborhood, and how a system designed to protect children failed so spectacularly that it took 23 years for anyone to even look for them again. The twins had just turned 15. Danette Latonia Millbrook and Jeanette Latrice Millbrook were fraternal twins, but they couldn't have been more different. Jeanette was the quiet one, sweet and reserved, someone who loved kids and animals. Danette was her protector, louder, always ready to stand up for her sister when needed. They lived with their mother, Mary Louise Sturgis, and their younger sister Shanta in the Cooney Circle Apartments, a housing project in Augusta. Their father, John Millbrook, had been out of the picture since the twins were 2 years old. Louise had divorced him due to his abusive behavior, determined to protect her children. That Sunday started like any other. The family attended church together in the morning, then returned home for lunch. It was a normal day in what seemed like a normal life. But by evening, 2 members of the Millbrook family would be gone forever. The twins had left their apartment 3 times that day. First for church, then to pick up lunch from Church's Chicken on Milledgeville Road, and finally to collect bus fare from their grandfather. It was during this third trip that everything went wrong. They stopped at the Pump and Shop gas station on the corner of 12th Street and Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. This wasn't unusual. They knew the area well, and the Clark Gloria recognized them immediately. The twins bought their snacks, chatted briefly, and left together. Gloria would later become a crucial witness, not because she saw something suspicious, but because she didn't. Everything appeared completely normal. The twins seemed relaxed, happy even. There was no sign of distress, no indication that anything was wrong. But here's where the story takes its first disturbing turn. Gloria noticed a vehicle parked outside the gas station while the twins were inside. She couldn't provide a description of the car or its occupants, but its presence would later become a haunting detail in a case full of unanswered questions. The twins never made it home. When evening came and Danette and Jeanette hadn't returned, their mother Louise began to worry. This wasn't like them. Despite having 8 siblings total, the twins were homebodies. They didn't hang out on street corners or stay out late without permission. By nightfall, panic had set in. Louise called the police, but what happened next would set the tone for one of the most mishandled missing persons investigations in recent memory. The initial response was swift, but not in the way you might expect. Instead of launching an immediate search, police quickly labeled the twins as runaways. No extensive search was conducted. No neighborhood canvassing took place. The assumption was simple and devastating. These were just 2 black girls from the projects who had decided to run away from home. But the runaway theory made absolutely no sense. These girls had no identification, no documentation, and roughly $20 between them. They were 15 years old in an era before cell phones or social media. Where exactly were they supposed to run to? The family knew something terrible had happened. 12-year-old Shanta even walked with her mother that first night, searching the neighborhood, calling out their names into the darkness. But police weren't interested in searching. They were interested in closing cases. What happened next reveals just how broken the system truly was. The original investigator, whose name remains in the case files, made errors that would haunt this investigation for decades. He misspelled the twins' last name as Millbrooks in official reports. He listed Jeanette's middle name incorrectly as Latressa instead of Latrice. These weren't minor clerical errors. These were mistakes that would make it harder for anyone searching databases to find information about the missing girls. But the real catastrophe was yet to come. In April 1991, just over a year after the twins disappeared, the investigating detective visited the Millbrook family home. He delivered news that should have brought relief, but instead brought confusion and heartbreak. The case was being closed, he told Louise. The reason? The twins had been found. Louise was stunned. Found where? When? Why hadn't anyone contacted the family? The detective's explanation was as bizarre as it was cruel. He claimed the girls were now 17 years old, and therefore could not be legally forced to return home even if they were located. But here's the problem with that explanation. The twins had disappeared in March 1990 when they were 15. By April 1991, they would have been 16, not 17. More importantly, if they had truly been found, why hadn't they contacted their family? Why hadn't they called their mother, their siblings, anyone? The family never received any proof that their daughters had been located. No phone call, no letter, no message of any kind. For a family that had been desperately searching for over a year, this explanation felt like a cruel joke. Yet the case remained officially closed. The twins' names stayed in the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children database for 2 more years, until 1993, when police called to have them permanently removed. The reason given to the center was that the girls had been found. The reason given to the family was that they couldn't be forced to come home. Which story was true? How could both explanations coexist? These questions would torment the Millbrook family for the next 2 decades. Meanwhile, life in Augusta continued. The twins' mother, Louise, struggled with grief and unanswered questions. Their younger sister, Shanta, grew up watching her mother cry every day, seeing the pain that never went away. She made herself a promise that would define her adult life. She would never stop looking for her sisters. If you've made it this far in this story, you're probably feeling the same frustration and anger that the Millbrook family lived with every single day. The system that was supposed to protect these girls had not just failed them, it had actively worked against finding them. But before we continue, I need you to do something. If this story is making you feel anything at all, if you're invested in seeing justice for Danette and Jeanette, hit that like button right now. And if you want to see more cases like this exposed, subscribe to this channel, because what comes next will shock you even more. The original case file disappeared. Not misplaced, not misfiled, but completely gone. Every piece of physical evidence, every witness statement, every photograph from the initial investigation simply vanished from the Richmond County Sheriff's Office records. This wasn't discovered until years later when family members tried to access information about the case. They were told that no such file existed. For a family already devastated by the loss of 2 daughters, this was another crushing blow. It was as if their children had been erased from official memory, but Shanta Sturgis refused to let her sisters be forgotten. As she grew older, she became more vocal, more persistent. She called the sheriff's office regularly, demanding answers, demanding action. She was told repeatedly that there was nothing more that could be done. Everything changed in 2013 when Richmond County elected a new sheriff, Richard Roundtree. Unlike his predecessors, Roundtree was willing to listen when Shanta Sturgis called his office demanding answers about her missing sisters. For the first time in over 2 decades, someone in law enforcement took the Millbrook case seriously. Sheriff Roundtree made a decision that would reignite hope for the family. He officially reopened the investigation into the disappearance of Danette and Jeanette Millbrook. But reopening a case with no file, no physical evidence, and faded memories presented enormous challenges. The investigators had to start from scratch, conducting interviews with family members, friends, and anyone who might remember something from that March day in 1990. The reopened investigation revealed disturbing details that had been overlooked or ignored in the original case. The gas station where the twins were last seen was in an area known for criminal activity. There had been other disappearances of young women in Augusta around the same time period, yet none of these connections had been properly investigated. In 2017, something remarkable happened. A podcast called The Fall Line began investigating the Millbrook twins case in depth. The podcast hosts, Laura Norton and Brooke Hargrove, brought fresh eyes and thorough research to a case that had been ignored for decades. Their work uncovered inconsistencies, raised new questions, and most importantly, kept the twins' story in the public consciousness. They even helped raise a $10,000 reward for information leading to the twins' whereabouts. 2 years later, in 2019, the Oxygen Network aired a documentary series called The Disappearance of the Millbrook Twins. This brought national attention to the case for the first time, exposing the failures of the original investigation to a broader audience. The documentary raised uncomfortable questions about whether racism and classism had played a role in how the case was handled. 2 black teenage girls from a housing project had essentially been written off as runaways without any real investigation. Would the response have been different if they had been white girls from a wealthy neighborhood? But here's where this story takes a hopeful turn. In late 2023, the Millbrook family announced that they had hired their first-ever private investigator. Funded by private donors from a non-profit organization, this investigator has been working the case for several months and has already uncovered potential new information. Shanta Sturgis, now in her 40s, remains cautiously optimistic. She told reporters that the private investigator has identified new persons of interest and is systematically ruling out suspects, including registered sex offenders who were living in the Augusta area in 1990. The investigator has also been conducting searches in areas where the twins might have been taken, including locations around the Brickyard Pond area that had been mentioned by unreliable witnesses in previous years. While Shanta keeps most details confidential to protect the ongoing investigation, she has hinted that cadaver dogs may be assisting in these searches. A new billboard has been erected in Augusta, featuring photos of what the twins might look like today. The reward money has grown over the years, now offering up to $50,000 for information leading to their whereabouts or the resolution of their case. The billboard directs people to a website where tips can be submitted anonymously. This technological advancement represents something the original investigation never had, a way for people with information to come forward without fear. If you're watching this and you lived in Augusta, Georgia in 1990, if you remember seeing these twins, if you have any information at all, please don't keep it to yourself. Two families have been living in agony for over 3 decades. Your information could be the key that finally brings them peace. The case has also revealed broader problems with how missing persons cases are handled, particularly when the victims are young people of color from disadvantaged communities. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children has since implemented better tracking systems to prevent cases from being incorrectly closed or removed from databases. Today, Danette and Jeanette would be 49 years old. Their mother, Louise, now approaching 70, continues to hope for answers. Their father, John, passed away in 2021, never knowing what happened to his daughters. Shanta Sturgis runs a Facebook page called Missing Danette and Jeanette Millbrook, where she shares updates and keeps their memory alive. She has dedicated her adult life to finding her sisters, becoming a voice for other families of missing persons who feel ignored by the system. The DNA profiles of both twins have been entered into national databases. If remains are ever found, identification would be possible. Advanced forensic techniques that didn't exist in 1990 are now available to help solve cold cases like this one. Recent advances in genealogical DNA testing have helped solve numerous cold cases across the country. While the Millbrook case doesn't yet have physical evidence to test, these scientific breakthroughs offer hope that future discoveries could lead to answers. The private investigator currently working the case has expressed confidence that it can be solved. Unlike previous efforts, this investigation has resources, modern technology, and most importantly, a commitment to finding the truth, regardless of how long it takes. 34 years have passed since Danette and Jeanette Millbrook walked out of that gas station and into oblivion. 34 years of unanswered questions, sleepless nights, and a mother's endless grief. This case represents everything wrong with how society treats its most vulnerable members. 2 young black girls from a poor neighborhood were dismissed as runaways without investigation. Their case file disappeared. Their names were removed from missing children databases based on false information. But it also represents the power of family love and determination. Shanta Sturgis never gave up. She fought for decades to get someone to listen, to care, to investigate. Her persistence reopened this case and brought it national attention. The Millbrook twins case reminds us that every missing person matters. Every disappearance deserves a thorough investigation. Every family deserves answers. As we close this story, remember that it's not over. Somewhere out there, someone knows what happened to Danette and Jeanette Millbrook. Someone has information that could finally bring peace to a family that has suffered for over 3 decades. If this case has moved you, if you believe that justice delayed should not be justice denied, then share this story. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and help us keep these cases in the public eye. Because the moment we stop talking about the disappeared is the moment we let them disappear forever. The Millbrook twins deserve justice. Their family deserves answers, and until both are achieved, their story must continue to be told. 10 years. 10 long years since 2-year-old Dior Kunz Jr. vanished from the Timber Creek campground in Lemhi County on July 10, 2015. What should have been a simple family camping trip turned into America's most baffling missing child case. Picture this: a remote wilderness campground, 4 adults, 1 toddler, and in the span of 20 minutes, a little boy wearing a camouflage jacket and cowboy boots simply disappeared. No trace, no evidence, no body, just gone. But here's what makes this case truly haunting. The parents who reported their child missing, the same parents who called 911, the same parents who organized search parties, they became the prime suspects in their own son's disappearance. Mitchell and Kunz voluntarily took lie detector tests, and Sheriff Lynn Bowerman initially said investigators did not suspect foul play. But in January 2016, Bowerman named Dior's parents as suspects, stating they had been less than truthful in interviews and polygraph tests. Welcome to the case that has divided a nation, spawned countless theories, and left investigators questioning everything they thought they knew about missing children cases. This is the story of Dior Kunz Jr. Dior and his parents, Jessica Mitchell and Vernal Dior Kunz, left Idaho Falls the afternoon of July 9, 2015, for a camping trip in Lemhi County. Dior's great-grandfather, Robert Walton, and his friend, Isaac Reinwand, drove in a separate vehicle and met up with the young family at Timber Creek Campground, a remote area around 125 miles northwest of Idaho Falls near Leadore. The campground wasn't your typical family destination. It was isolated, primitive. There's one road in and one road out to the remote Timber Creek Campground, the kind of place where cell phone service was spotty at best and the nearest town was miles away. Dior Kunz Jr. was 2 years old. He would be almost 13 this December 2025. He was described by family as a happy child who loved the outdoors. This wasn't his first camping trip. He was comfortable in nature, loved exploring, and according to his parents, he was excited about this particular adventure. The group consisted of 5 people: Jessica Mitchell, Dior's mother, in her mid-20s; Vernal Dior Kunz Sr., the father, in his 30s; Robert Walton, Jessica's grandfather, an elderly man who used a hearing aid and carried an oxygen tank; Isaac Reinwand, Walton's friend; and little Dior Jr., July 10th, 2015. A Friday morning that started like any other camping day. The family woke up at the campsite. They cooked breakfast. The group traveled 40 minutes down the highway to the Stage Shop, a convenience store in Leadore. Dior was wearing his little camouflage jacket, the same jacket that would later become a crucial piece of evidence. He had on cowboy boots that were too big for his feet and blue pajama pants. When they returned to the campsite, everything seemed normal. Jessica and Vernal decided to take a walk down to a creek area that Isaac Reinwand had shown them, a fishing spot about a 20-minute walk from the main campsite. Here's where the stories begin to diverge, and this is critical to understanding why this case became so controversial. According to Jessica and Vernal, they told Robert Walton they were leaving Dior with him while they went to explore the creek. According to Walton, he never heard this conversation and assumed Dior had gone with his parents. The parents say they were gone for about 20 minutes. When they returned, Dior wasn't with his great-grandfather. Walton thought he was with his parents. The parents thought he was with Walton. When they asked Walton where Dior was, he replied in shock, "I thought he was with you." Jessica and Vernal then asked Isaac, who was also unaware of Dior's whereabouts. All 4 adults started shouting the toddler's name, but soon realized that he was nowhere to be found. At 2:30 p.m., Jessica Mitchell called 911. The response was swift and massive. Frantic searches started within hours of that 911 call, with more than 170 volunteers and trained rescue teams trying to find the toddler, but no trace was ever found. Search and rescue teams combed through the wilderness. Helicopters circled overhead. Trained dogs were brought in. The FBI joined the investigation. Volunteers from across the region arrived to help search. But here's what was strange. In most missing child cases involving toddlers in wilderness areas, you find something. A piece of clothing caught on a branch, footprints in the mud, some trace that shows which direction the child went. With Dior, there was absolutely nothing. Sheriff Bowerman stated that if an animal had taken him, there would be evidence left behind, like Dior's boots that were too big for him. Bowerman believed they would have fallen off. After days and weeks of searching, Not a trace of Dior was found at the campground. If you're watching this and you have children, I want you to pause for a moment and imagine this scenario. You're at a campground. Your child is playing. You step away for 20 minutes. You come back and they're gone. Not just hiding, not just wandering off, completely vanished without a single trace in an area that's been searched by hundreds of people. Now imagine that within months, you're not being treated as a grieving parent anymore. You're being treated as a suspect. If this story is shaking you to your core, like it did me when I first heard it, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell, because we're about to uncover evidence in this case that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about missing persons investigations. Initially, law enforcement treated this as a straightforward missing child case. The parents were cooperative. They voluntarily took polygraph tests. They participated in extensive interviews. But then, things started to change. Sheriff Lynn Bowerman revealed that Kunz and Mitchell had changed their story numerous times about what happened during the family camping trip on July 10th. Their timeline keeps changing, where they were at keeps changing, and movements and statements about Dior Jr. keep changing, Bowerman said at the time. Their statements don't match. And it's frustrating because we have absolutely no idea where Dior is. There have been so many inconsistencies that it's hard to tell the truth from everything they've said. The polygraph tests that the parents had voluntarily taken. Bowerman revealed that portions of polygraph tests administered to Kunz and Mitchell came back less than truthful, including questions about knowing what happened to Dior, why the child disappeared, and where the toddler is located. In January 2016, just 6 months after Dior's disappearance, Sheriff Lynn Bowerman officially named Dior's parents as suspects, stating they had been less than truthful in interviews and polygraph tests. Remember that trip to the Stage Shop convenience store on the morning Dior disappeared? This became a crucial point in the investigation. The family claimed the store clerk witnessed Mitchell and Kunz Sr. with their son around 1 p.m. However, when questioned later, the clerk stated they saw a blond boy at 6 p.m. that night, not 1 p.m., the time the parents had given to police in their reports. Vernal Kunz later stated the clerk was mistaken, a claim that has been questioned by investigators. This discrepancy might seem minor, but in a missing person case, timeline is everything. If the parents were wrong about when they visited the store, what else might they be wrong about? If they were deliberately lying about the timeline, why? What happened next turned this case from a missing child investigation into something resembling a true crime thriller. The family hired their first private investigator, Frank Vilt. Initially, Vilt believed Dior had been abducted, but in early 2016, he ended his involvement and publicly stated that Kunz and Mitchell had lied about their son's disappearance. Vilt died in August 2023. Then came Philip Klein from Klein Investigations and Consulting in Texas. Klein would become the most controversial figure in this entire case. Klein didn't just investigate the case, he made explosive public statements about it. Klein concluded Dior was the victim of an accidental homicide and that Mitchell and Kunz were involved. But here's where it gets really bizarre. Klein was hired by the parents to find their missing son. The same parents who were paying him eventually fired him because of his accusations against them. In 2019, Klein made a discovery that sent shockwaves through the true crime community. Klein's team searched leftover furniture and clothing at an apartment complex in Idaho Falls after the couple was evicted for not paying rent. The landlord gave investigators permission to search the abandoned property. What they found was explosive. 4 Matchbox cars that were previously described by the parents as missing, as well as a camouflage jacket that the boy's parents said he was wearing on the day he went missing. Let that sink in. The camouflage jacket that Dior was supposedly wearing when he disappeared, the jacket his parents described to police, the jacket that should have been somewhere in the wilderness if he had wandered off or been taken by an animal, was found in his parents' abandoned apartment. How do you explain that? If your child disappears wearing a jacket in the wilderness, how does that jacket end up back in your apartment? The case took another dramatic turn in 2019 when the current private investigator David Marshburn brought cadaver dogs to the campground. Marshburn's dogs are trained only with human cadavers, human bone and teeth, so they only alert to human remains. The dogs are also trained to detect remains up to 6 feet underground. Marshburn reported that one of his dogs went to the water and suddenly dashed to a specific spot. Our oldest dog, Kaz, the way he alerts, he lays down. He just lays down on the spot. Now it can be a foot over, a foot here, or a foot in front, but he lays on the strongest scent. But here's what made this discovery even more significant. After Marshburn's dogs alerted, Sheriff Penner brought in an independent cadaver dog, which also alerted on the same area of the campground. 2 different cadaver dogs from different handlers alerting on the same spot. In cadaver dog work, that's about as close to confirmation as you can get. There's another piece of this puzzle that often gets overlooked, but is absolutely crucial. Isaac Reinwand, Robert Walton's friend, who was at the campground that day. According to the Justice for Baby Dior group, Isaac Factory reset his phone 3 times before law enforcement arrived at the scene. 3 times. Who does that? What was he trying to hide that he wanted no one to see? Investigators have also questioned what Reinwand was doing with a shovel that weekend, and whether he knows more about Dior's whereabouts than he's admitted. Here's something most people following this case don't know about. There's been a recent development in 2024 that could change everything. David Marshburn returned to the site with friends and climbed a challenging route up the nearby mountain, where he discovered new evidence, another jacket. This jacket was manufactured in 2014 or early 2015, the same time frame as Dior's disappearance. Lemhi County Sheriff John Bennett turned the jacket over to the Idaho State Police Lab in late 2024 for DNA comparison. However, investigators were told only a partial DNA profile was obtained, and due to low-level results and limited DNA, no conclusion could be made. As of December 2024, this case remains unsolved. No arrests have been made. No charges have been filed. Dior Kunz Jr. would be almost 13 years old today. The investigation has been marked by bitter legal battles. In December 2024, the leaders of a controversial Facebook group called Justice for Dior settled a libel lawsuit with Vernal Kunz, the father. The group had been spreading theories online that Vernal was involved in his son's disappearance. Vernal's attorney, Alan Browning, says his client 1000% had nothing to do with his son's disappearance, and that the online harassment pushed Vernal to the point of near suicide. Philip Klein was recently rehired by an anonymous family member to continue investigating the case after being off it for several years, due to the major falling out with the parents. Before we get to my analysis of what I think really happened here, I need you to do something. Look at the comments section right now and tell me what your theory is. Do you think the parents are involved? Do you think this was a tragic accident that spiraled out of control? Or do you believe Dior really did just vanish without a trace? Hit that like button if you think there's more to this story than meets the eye, because what I'm about to tell you next will blow your mind. Current and former Lemhi County sheriffs continue following up on tips and leads in the case. Investigators have 3 main theories about what happened. Dior was taken by a stranger, there was foul play involving people he was camping with, or nature took him, meaning he walked off or an animal attacked him. Law enforcement has said the kidnapping theory seems the least likely. Here's what we know for certain. Robert Walton, Dior's great-grandfather, died in June 2019, taking whatever knowledge he had to his grave. Isaac Reinwand, when contacted recently, said he was trying to put this behind him and move forward. Over the years, bones have been found at the campsite. Investigators send photos to anthropologists at Idaho State University, and in each case, they've turned out to be animal remains. In one instance, a bone was sent to the FBI in Quantico, Virginia, for testing, but again, it was from an animal. Current Sheriff Steve Penner and Sheriff John Bennett do not consider Mitchell and Kunz suspects. Rather, They say everyone at the campsite that day is a person of interest because they were the last people to see Dior. Through all of this chaos, legal battles and accusations, there's one voice that cuts through everything: Dior's grandmother, Trina Clegg. In her statement on behalf of Dior's mother, Jessica Mitchell, she wrote, "As a family, we still pray every day for an answer to what happened 10 years ago that still haunts us with heartfelt pain and grief, missing our sweet baby Dior. It is still the same from day one. The fact remains the same. Baby Dior is still missing, and there has been zero evidence of how at this time." Jessica Mitchell, through her mother, said the pain of each day still feels the same as the day Dior went missing. 10 years later, we're left with more questions than answers. A camouflage jacket found in an abandoned apartment, cadaver dogs alerting to human remains, failed polygraph tests, changing stories, a phone wiped clean 3 times before police arrived. But somewhere in all of this confusion, chaos, and controversy, there's a little boy who would be turning 13 this December. A little boy who loved camping, who loved the outdoors, who trusted the adults around him to keep him safe. Whether this was a tragic accident that spiraled into a cover-up, whether it was something more deliberate, or whether Dior really did just vanish into the Idaho wilderness, one thing remains constant: a family destroyed, a community divided, and a child who deserves justice. If you have any information about this case, please contact the Lemhi County Sheriff's Office at 208-756-8980. If this case has affected you the way it's affected me, please subscribe to this channel. We dive deep into cases like this that challenge everything we think we know about missing persons investigations. Hit that notification bell because we're not stopping until we find answers for families like Dior's. And remember, someone, somewhere, knows what happened to Dior Kunz Jr. The truth always comes out eventually. The question is, will it come out in time for his family to finally have the closure they deserve? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next investigation. A security camera captures a man buying gas at 2:04 a.m. in Matawan, Michigan. He looks tired but alert, going through the motions of a routine stop. Less than 48 hours later, that same man would vanish without a trace over 1,000 miles away in Texas, leaving behind 2 young sons, a promising future, and one of the most baffling disappearances in Michigan's history. This is the story of Jacob Kavanaugh, a story that begins with a simple game of disc golf and ends with more questions than answers. A story that has haunted investigators for nearly 15 years and continues to baffle experts today. On March 31, 2010, 31-year-old Jacob Kavanaugh was living what many would consider a stable life. He was weeks away from graduating with his mechanic certification from Northwestern Michigan College. He served his country as a member of the Michigan Army National Guard. He worked at Dave's Garage in Traverse City, where he was well-liked and owned $20,000 worth of professional tools. Most importantly, he was a devoted father to 2 young boys, ages 6 and 12. Jacob was the 7th of 10 children in his family, born in Grand, Michigan. He was a member of the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians, standing 5 feet 11 inches tall, with short black hair and brown eyes. Those who knew him described him as responsible, family-oriented, and deeply committed to his sons. His sister Sandra Cranson would later tell investigators that Jacob had grown up mostly without his father, making his dedication to his own children even more meaningful. The day that would change everything started like any other. March 31, 2010, was a typical spring day in northern Michigan. Jacob made plans to play disc golf at Hickory Hills with his friend Gary Wittig, someone he'd known for a couple of years. Disc golf was more than just a hobby for Jacob. It was a passion he shared with his sons, a way to spend quality time outdoors, and a sport that would later be memorialized in his honor. The game itself was unremarkable. Gary Wittig would later tell police that Jacob seemed to be in great spirits that day. There were no signs of distress, no mention of problems, no indication that anything was wrong. Their conversation was casual, the kind of easy banter between friends enjoying an afternoon activity. Jacob appeared relaxed and happy, showing no signs of the journey he was about to embark on. After finishing their game around 7:30 p.m., Gary invited Jacob to join him and other friends for drinks at some local bars. It was a normal invitation, the kind of social gathering that happens every day across America. But Jacob declined. He told Gary he needed to go home and study for his classes at Northwestern Michigan College. This was completely in character for Jacob. He was serious about his education, disciplined about his responsibilities, and focused on building a better future for himself and his sons. Jacob drove Gary to the open space, a beachside park in Traverse City, dropping him off near the volleyball courts. This would be the last time Gary Wittig, or anyone else in Michigan, would see Jacob Kavanaugh alive. At 7:30 p.m. on March 31, 2010, Jacob drove away from the open space in his silver 2002 Chevrolet Malibu, license plate BKQ 4107. The car had minor damage on the front passenger side panel, a detail that would become crucial for identification purposes. What happened next defies explanation and has puzzled investigators for over a decade. Jacob never made it home to his mother's house in Groen, where he was staying while attending college. When he didn't return that night, his family immediately knew something was wrong. This wasn't like Jacob. He was reliable, communicative, and would never disappear without telling someone where he was going. His sister Sandra emphasized this point repeatedly to investigators, saying it was totally out of character for him not to call. But Jacob wasn't just gone. He was on the move, and the electronic trail he left behind tells a story that investigators are still trying to understand today. At 1:08 a.m. on April 1st, just 5.5 hours after dropping off his friend, Jacob called an automated system to confirm he was still taking his community college classes. Think about that for a moment. This wasn't a man who had suddenly decided to abandon his life. This was someone who, even in whatever situation he found himself in, was still thinking about his educational commitments, still maintaining his responsibilities. 1 hour later, at 2:04 a.m., Jacob's debit card was used at a Speedway gas station in Matawan, Michigan. This purchase was captured on the station's security cameras, providing investigators with the last confirmed visual evidence of Jacob in Michigan. The footage shows him going through the routine motions of buying gas, but it also represents something much more significant. This gas purchase was approximately 150 miles south of Traverse City, indicating that Jacob had been driving for hours through the night. The question that haunts investigators is simple: why? What could have prompted Jacob to leave his plans, his studies, his family, and begin driving south in the middle of the night? The security footage from Matawan doesn't provide any answers. Jacob appears alone, calm and purposeful. But the footage can't tell us what was driving him to make this inexplicable journey. From Matawan, Jacob's trail becomes even more mysterious. His cell phone records show that his phone pinged off a cell tower near Springfield, Missouri, more than 12 hours after the gas station purchase. Springfield is approximately 350 miles southwest of Matawan, indicating that Jacob continued driving through the day on April 1st, traveling deeper into the American heartland. But Jacob's journey wasn't over. Police records show that sometime after midnight on April 2nd, officers in Hollister, Missouri, conducted a routine traffic stop and ran the license plates on Jacob's silver Malibu. This wasn't an arrest or a citation. It was simply a routine check, the kind that happens thousands of times every day across the country. The officers who encountered Jacob noted nothing unusual about him or his behavior. He wasn't under the influence, wasn't acting erratically, and gave no indication that he was in distress or danger. Think about the implications of this encounter. Jacob had been driving for over 24 hours at this point, traveling hundreds of miles from his home in Michigan. Yet to trained law enforcement officers, he appeared normal enough that they didn't feel the need to investigate further or file any reports beyond the routine license plate check. This suggests that whatever was motivating Jacob's journey It wasn't immediately apparent to outside observers. The next confirmed sighting of Jacob came from another law enforcement encounter, this time in Arkansas. A patrol officer spotted Jacob sleeping in his car at a rest area in West Fork, Arkansas. Again, the officer noted nothing unusual about the situation. People sleep in their cars at rest areas for various legitimate reasons: fatigue, saving money on hotels, or simply taking a break during a long journey. The officer had no reason to investigate further, and Jacob apparently woke up and continued on his way. This sighting in West Fork, Arkansas, on April 2, 2010, would be the last confirmed visual contact anyone would have with Jacob Kavanaugh. But his electronic trail continued for a few more hours, leading to an even more puzzling conclusion to an already baffling case. Jacob's debit card was used one final time at a gas station in Sweetwater, Texas. Sweetwater sits in the heart of West Texas, between Abilene and El Paso, over 1,000 miles from Jacob's home in Michigan. The purchase was for $30 worth of gasoline, but here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. The security cameras at this gas station did not capture clear footage of who made the purchase. This detail has haunted investigators for years. Was it Jacob himself who bought the gas? Or had something happened to him between Arkansas and Texas? The uncertainty surrounding this final transaction adds another layer of mystery to an already incomprehensible case. After the Sweetwater gas purchase, Jacob's debit card was never used again. His cell phone, which had been pinging towers throughout his journey south, went silent. Whether the battery died or the phone was turned off, investigators never determined. But what they do know is that after April 2, 2010, all electronic traces of Jacob Kavanaugh vanished. If you're finding this case as fascinating and puzzling as I am, and you want to stay updated on more mysterious disappearances and cold cases like this one, hit that subscribe button right now. These stories need to be told, and these families deserve to have their loved ones remembered. Your subscription helps ensure we can continue investigating and sharing these important cases. Jacob's family didn't wait long to sound the alarm. When he failed to return home or make contact, they immediately began calling friends, family members, and law enforcement. Sandra Cranston, one of Jacob's 9 siblings, emphasized to anyone who would listen that this behavior was completely out of character for her brother. Jacob was not the type of person to disappear without explanation. He was responsible, caring, and deeply committed to his children. The investigation revealed details that made Jacob's disappearance even more perplexing. He had left his cell phone charger at home, suggesting he hadn't planned an extended trip. His family confirmed that he hadn't taken any clothes, money, or personal belongings beyond what he had with him when he left for disc golf. Most significantly, Jacob was just weeks away from graduating with his mechanic certification, a goal he had worked toward for months. The case took on new dimensions in 2017, when Jacob's vehicle identification number was reportedly flagged at a possible scrapyard in Mexico. This development suggested that Jacob's car had somehow made its way across the international border, but there were no records of Jacob himself crossing into Mexico. The implications of this discovery are staggering. How did Jacob's car end up in Mexico? Was Jacob with it? Did someone else drive it there? In 2015, for legal and financial reasons, courts officially declared Jacob Kavanaugh deceased. This legal declaration allowed his family to handle various administrative matters, but it didn't bring them the closure they desperately sought. Captain Chris Clark of the Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Office emphasized that the legal declaration of death did not mean the case was closed. The investigation continued, and investigators remained committed to finding answers. Jacob's sons, who were 6 and 12 when their father disappeared, have grown up with the weight of this unsolved mystery. In 2024, Xander Kavanaugh, now an adult, spoke publicly about his complicated feelings regarding his father's disappearance. His words reveal the emotional toll this case has taken on the family. Xander expressed conflicted emotions, saying he would rather know his father was dead than believe he had abandoned his children voluntarily. The pain in his statement reflects the ongoing anguish experienced by families of missing persons caught between hope and despair. One of the most poignant memorials to Jacob can be found at the Hickory Hills disc golf course where he played his final game. His sons created and installed a bench in their father's memory, dedicated to his love of the sport he had shared with them. The bench serves as a place where family members can feel connected to Jacob and remember the positive aspects of his life, rather than focusing solely on his mysterious disappearance. The renewed investigation in 2024 represents the most comprehensive effort to solve Jacob's case in years. The Sheriff's Office partnered with multiple agencies, including Michigan State Police, the Michigan State Police Crime Lab, and Western Michigan University's Cold Case Program. This collaboration brings together resources, expertise, and technology that weren't available in 2010. 5 WMU students have been specifically assigned to assist with Jacob's case. Their tasks include creating comprehensive digital case files, developing detailed indexes of people connected to the investigation, analyzing social media and phone records, and constructing precise timelines and maps of Jacob's movements. This academic involvement brings fresh perspectives and modern analytical techniques to evidence that has been examined countless times over the past 14 years. Detective Jason Polzian, one of the current investigators on the case, has spent considerable time analyzing the timeline of Jacob's movements. The pattern of purchases and sightings suggests someone who was traveling with purpose, making regular stops for gas and rest. But the destination and motivation remain completely unknown. In 2022, investigators conducted a fresh round of interviews, hoping that the passage of time might have changed people's willingness to share information. Detective Polzian noted that some individual stories contained discrepancies, suggesting that not everyone had been completely forthcoming in earlier interviews. Captain Chris Clark explained that modern investigative techniques offer new possibilities for solving cold cases. Advanced computer algorithms can analyze vast amounts of data more efficiently. The proliferation of cell phone towers provides more detailed location tracking. License plate readers and surveillance cameras are far more common now than they were 14 years ago. If this case has touched you the way it's touched me, and you want to help keep Jacob's story alive and ensure his family gets the answers they deserve, please hit that like button and share this video. Every share could be the one that reaches someone with crucial information. These families need our support, and their loved ones deserve justice. As we conclude this investigation into the Jacob Kavanaugh case, we're left with more questions than answers. What happened during those crucial 48 hours between March 31st and April 2nd, 2010? Why did a responsible father and dedicated student suddenly drive over 1,000 miles from home? Who made that final gas purchase in Sweetwater, Texas? How did Jacob's car end up possibly in Mexico? And most importantly, where is Jacob Kavanaugh today? These questions have haunted investigators, tormented Jacob's family, and captivated true crime enthusiasts for nearly 15 years. The renewed investigation offers hope that modern technology and fresh approaches might finally provide answers. But until those answers come, Jacob's family continues to live with uncertainty. His sons continue to grow up without their father, and his case remains one of Michigan's most puzzling disappearances. The bench at Hickory Hills disc golf course stands as a testament to Jacob's memory and his family's enduring love. Whether Jacob Kavanaugh is alive somewhere, starting over with a new identity, or whether he met with tragedy during that mysterious journey south, his story serves as a reminder of how quickly life can change, and how many questions can remain unanswered even in our connected, surveilled modern world. If you have any information about Jacob Kavanaugh's disappearance, please contact the Grand Traverse County Sheriff's Office at 231-995-5039. Your information, no matter how insignificant it might seem, could be the key to finally solving this 15-year mystery and bringing peace to a family that has waited far too long for answers. The search for Jacob Kavanaugh continues, and until he's found, his story will remain one of America's most compelling unsolved mysteries. 12 seconds. That's all it took for a routine traffic stop in Tulsa, Oklahoma, to become a nightmare that would shatter multiple families forever. On June 29, 2020, Police Sergeant Craig Johnson approached what seemed like an ordinary vehicle during a late-night patrol. What he didn't know was that the man behind the wheel, David Ware, had already made a decision that would cost Johnson his life. But here's what makes this case truly disturbing. The getaway driver who helped Ware escape wasn't some hardened criminal. He was just a regular guy named Matthew Hall who made one catastrophic choice that would haunt him for the next 24 years of his life. Tonight, we're diving deep into a case that reveals how quickly ordinary people can become accessories to unthinkable violence. A case where body camera footage captured every horrifying second, where a father was gunned down in cold blood, and where justice came at a price that left everyone questioning whether it was enough. This is the story of the Matthew Hall case, June 29, 2020, Tulsa, Oklahoma. It was just past 11 p.m. when Sergeant Craig Johnson and Officer Arash Zarkashan pulled over a vehicle for what appeared to be a routine traffic violation. Johnson, a dedicated officer with years of experience, had no reason to suspect that this stop would be any different from the thousands he'd conducted before. But David Ware had other plans. As the officers approached the vehicle, their body cameras rolling, Ware made a split-second decision that would change everything. Without warning, he opened fire on both officers. The footage, later released by the Tulsa Police Department, shows the terrifying moments as bullets flew and chaos erupted on that quiet street. Sergeant Johnson was struck and mortally wounded. Officer Zarkashan, despite suffering severe life-threatening injuries, somehow survived the brutal attack. But as the officers lay bleeding on the asphalt, something even more disturbing was about to unfold. Enter Matthew Hall. While Johnson fought for his life and Zarkashan struggled with his injuries, a vehicle suddenly appeared on the scene. The driver? Matthew Hall, who would later become known as the getaway driver in one of Tulsa's most shocking police shootings. In those crucial moments after the attack, Hall made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He helped David Ware escape. But here's where this case gets complicated. Hall wasn't just some random accomplice who happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The evidence would later reveal that his involvement went beyond simply driving Ware away from the scene. According to prosecutors, Hall also helped hide the weapon used in the shooting, making him an accessory to not just one, but two separate felony charges. The question that would haunt the courtroom months later was simple, yet profound. How does an ordinary person become an accessory to such a heinous crime? Was Hall a willing participant in Ware's violent plan, or was he simply caught up in a moment of panic that spiraled completely out of control? The answer would come to light through painstaking investigation, hours of body camera footage, and testimony that would bring a courtroom to tears. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Sergeant Craig Johnson's family faced their worst nightmare. His wife and young son rushed to his bedside, hoping and praying that somehow he would pull through. But Johnson's injuries were too severe. Despite the best efforts of medical professionals, he succumbed to his wounds, leaving behind a devastated family and a community in mourning. Officer Zarkashan, though critically injured, began the long road to recovery that would test his physical and emotional strength for months to come. As news of the shooting spread throughout Tulsa, the community was left reeling. How could such violence erupt during what should have been a routine traffic stop? And who was this Matthew Hall character who had helped the shooter escape justice? The investigation that followed would uncover a web of decisions and circumstances that led to this tragic night. But it would also raise uncomfortable questions about accountability, justice, and the fine line between being in the wrong place at the wrong time and actively participating in a crime. The manhunt for David Ware and Matthew Hall began immediately. Within hours of the shooting, law enforcement agencies across Oklahoma were searching for the two men who had turned a quiet Tulsa street into a crime scene. But it was the body camera footage that would prove to be the prosecution's most powerful weapon. The video, crystal clear and undeniable, showed Hall's vehicle arriving at the scene shortly after the shooting. Frame by frame, investigators could see Hall's car pulling up, Ware getting in, and the vehicle speeding away, while two officers lay wounded on the ground. This wasn't speculation or witness testimony that could be questioned. This was cold, hard evidence captured in high definition. Detective teams worked around the clock, analyzing every second of footage, tracking down leads, and building a case that would eventually put both men behind bars. The evidence was overwhelming, but the legal strategy would prove more complex than anyone anticipated. On June 30th, just one day after the shooting, both Ware and Hall were arrested. The speed of their capture was remarkable, but it was what happened next that would define the case for years to come. Ware, as expected, was charged with first-degree murder for Johnson's death and shooting with intent to kill for Zakashan's injuries. But Hall's charges were more nuanced and would become the center of intense legal debate. Prosecutors charged Hall with 2 counts of accessory to a felony, specifically accessory to shooting with intent to kill. The state argued that Hall's actions constituted 2 separate crimes. First, driving Ware away from the scene. Second, helping to hide the murder weapon. Hall's defense attorney, Brian Martin, saw things differently. Martin argued that his client's actions were part of one continuous act, and that charging Hall with 2 separate counts constituted double jeopardy. According to Martin, you can't punish someone twice for what is essentially the same crime committed in one sequence of events. This legal argument would become crucial during Hall's trial, but it was the emotional testimony that would capture headlines and break hearts. Fast forward to March 2021. Nearly 9 months after that fateful night, Matthew Hall found himself sitting in a Tulsa courtroom facing a jury of his peers. The trial that followed would be described by Hall's own attorney as highly emotional due to the circumstances surrounding the case. The prosecution, led by Tulsa County District Attorney Steve Kunzweiler and Assistant District Attorney Eric Grayles, had a straightforward strategy. Show the jury the body camera footage, present the evidence of Hall's involvement, and let the facts speak for themselves. But the defense faced an uphill battle. How do you defend someone whose actions are captured clearly on video helping a cop killer escape? Martin's strategy was to separate Hall from Ware's violent actions while acknowledging his client's poor judgment. If you're finding this case as compelling as I am, and you want to stay updated on more shocking true crime stories like this one, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next in this series. The trial proceedings revealed disturbing new details about that night. Prosecutors painted a picture of Hall as a willing accomplice who knew exactly what he was doing when he helped Ware escape. They argued that his actions weren't spontaneous, but deliberate choices that enabled a murderer to evade immediate capture. The defense countered with a different narrative. They portrayed Hall as someone who made a terrible split-second decision in a moment of panic, not a calculated criminal conspiracy. But it was the victim impact statements that would bring the courtroom to a standstill. Sergeant Johnson's widow took the stand, her voice breaking as she described the devastating impact of her husband's murder. But it was when Johnson's young son spoke that the true cost of Hall's actions became painfully clear. Assistant District Attorney Kevin Gray later described the scene, explaining how the little boy talked about wanting to play with his father, about building Legos together and sharing laughter. Instead, this child had to stand at the end of a hospital bed, begging his dad not to die. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. 3 hours to decide whether Matthew Hall's actions that night made him legally responsible as an accessory to the shooting of 2 police officers. When they returned, their verdict was unanimous: guilty on both counts. The recommended sentence? 12 years for each count. But the judge still had to decide whether Hall would serve these sentences concurrently, meaning at the same time, or consecutively, meaning one after the other. The difference between these 2 options would determine whether Hall spent 12 years or 24 years behind bars. March 22, 2021. The day Matthew Hall would learn his fate. Judge Musselman had a decision that would echo through the halls of justice for years to come. 24 years or 12 years. The difference between Hall seeing freedom in his 30s or spending the prime of his life behind bars. The courtroom was packed. Johnson's family sat in the front row, their faces etched with grief that time had not healed. Hall's supporters filled seats behind the defense table, hoping for mercy. The tension was suffocating. When Judge Musselman announced his decision, the words cut through the silence like a blade. 24 years, consecutive sentences. Hall would serve every single day of both 12-year terms, one after the other. The reasoning was clear. The judge viewed Hall's actions as two distinct crimes deserving separate punishment. Driving Ware from the scene was one crime. Hiding the murder weapon was another. Justice demanded accountability for both. Hall's attorney immediately announced plans to appeal, maintaining that the consecutive sentencing violated double jeopardy protections. But for now, Matthew Hall would begin what could be a quarter-century behind bars. But here's what makes this case even more complex. While Hall received his sentence, the main perpetrator, David Ware, was still awaiting trial. The man who actually pulled the trigger, who actually killed Sergeant Johnson and nearly killed Officer Zarkishan, hadn't faced justice yet. Prosecutors weren't taking any chances with Ware. They announced they would seek the death penalty, making this a capital murder case with the ultimate stakes. Ware's trial was scheduled for June 2021, nearly a full year after the shooting. The disparity raised uncomfortable questions. Hall, the getaway driver, had been sentenced to 24 years within 9 months of the crime. Ware, the actual shooter, was still navigating the legal system with his life hanging in the balance. This timing difference highlights a troubling reality in the American justice system. Sometimes the accomplices face consequences before the primary perpetrators, creating a strange dynamic where the supporting players are held accountable while the main actors continue fighting their charges. Officer Zarkishan, meanwhile, continued his recovery process. The physical wounds were healing, but the psychological trauma of that night would take much longer to overcome. His survival was nothing short of miraculous, but survival came with its own burdens that would last a lifetime. The Tulsa Police Department released the body camera footage to the public, a decision that sparked debate about transparency versus trauma. The video was disturbing, showing in graphic detail how quickly a routine traffic stop can turn deadly, but it also served as undeniable evidence of what happened that night. District Attorney Steve Kunzweiler praised the role of body cameras in securing Hall's conviction, noting that without this technology, the case might have been much more difficult to prosecute. The footage eliminated any doubt about Hall's presence and actions at the scene. Now here's where this case takes an interesting turn that most people don't know about. The legal precedent set by Hall's consecutive sentencing has implications far beyond this single case. Defense attorneys across Oklahoma are now arguing that similar accessory charges should be treated as single continuous acts rather than multiple separate crimes. Hall's appeal, which his attorney Brian Martin pursued aggressively, challenged not just his specific sentence, but the broader interpretation of accessory laws in Oklahoma. The outcome could potentially affect how getaway drivers and other accomplices are charged and sentenced in future cases. If you've been following this story and want to see how these legal battles continue to unfold, along with updates on other cases that are shaping our justice system, smash that like button and subscribe for more in-depth coverage. These stories don't end when the gavel falls, and neither does our coverage. But perhaps the most overlooked aspect of this case is its impact on police procedures and training. The Tulsa Police Department conducted extensive reviews of the incident, analyzing everything from the initial traffic stop to the officer's response during the shooting. These reviews led to updated protocols for high-risk traffic stops and enhanced training programs designed to help officers identify potentially dangerous situations before they escalate. Johnson's death, while tragic, contributed to changes that could save other officers' lives in the future. The broader community impact cannot be understated. Tulsa residents grappled with questions about police safety, criminal justice, and the randomness of violence that can erupt anywhere, anytime. The shooting happened in an ordinary neighborhood during what should have been a routine evening patrol. Local support groups formed to help families of fallen officers, while community leaders organized vigils and fundraisers for both Johnson's family and Zarkishan's recovery. The tragedy brought people together in ways that highlighted the best of human nature amid the worst of circumstances. As of today, Matthew Hall remains incarcerated, serving his 24-year sentence. His appeal process continues to work through the courts, but legal experts consider his chances of overturning the consecutive sentencing to be slim. David Ware's case concluded with his conviction and death sentence, though that process involved its own lengthy appeals that continue to this day. The wheels of justice turn slowly when life and death hang in the balance. Officer Zarkishan returned to duty after extensive rehabilitation, though he carries physical and emotional scars from that night. His recovery represents both the resilience of the human spirit and the lasting cost of violence on its survivors. Sergeant Craig Johnson was laid to rest with full honors, remembered not just as a victim, but as a dedicated public servant who gave his life in the line of duty. His son, now older, continues to grow up without his father, a permanent reminder of the ripple effects of that 12-second encounter. The Matthew Hall case serves as a stark reminder that split-second decisions can have lifetime consequences. Hall's choice to help Ware escape didn't just change his own future. It affected Johnson's family, Zarkishan's recovery, the Tulsa community, and the legal precedents that will guide similar cases for years to come. In a world where we often think about crime in terms of black and white, the Hall case exists in shades of gray. Was he a calculating accomplice or a panicked individual who made a terrible mistake? Was 24 years justice or excessive punishment for someone who didn't pull the trigger? These questions don't have easy answers, but they force us to confront uncomfortable truths about accountability, justice, and the weight of our choices in moments of crisis. The body camera footage that convicted Hall continues to serve as evidence in training programs across the country. New officers watch those 12 seconds to understand how quickly situations can escalate and how important their split-second decisions can be. For Matthew Hall, those 12 seconds in June 2020 cost him 24 years of his life. For Sergeant Johnson's family, they cost them everything. For Officer Zarkishan, they changed everything. And for all of us watching from the sidelines, they serve as a sobering reminder that in the space between right and wrong, between hero and accomplice, between freedom and prison, sometimes there are only seconds to choose. The Matthew Hall case is closed, but its lessons continue to resonate through courtrooms, police academies, and communities across America. Because sometimes the most important stories aren't about the crimes themselves, but about the choices we make when everything falls apart. At exactly 2:36 p.m. on July 11, 2005, a 19-year-old Native American woman named JoJo Boswell walked out of the Steele County Jail in Owatonna, Minnesota. Within minutes, she would vanish without a trace. No body, no answers, no justice. What happened in those final moments before JoJo disappeared forever would expose a system that failed her not just once, but repeatedly. JoJo Boswell was born on September 1, 1985, a member of the Minnesota Chippewa tribe White Earth Band. She stood 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighed around 135 pounds, and had distinctive features that should have made her impossible to forget. A mole on the left side of her face, light freckles scattered across her cheeks, a scar on her right cheek, and an 8-inch scar with possible staple marks running down her right arm. That last scar told a story of survival, perhaps from surgery or trauma. But JoJo never got the chance to tell that story herself. JoJo had been arrested for theft, though the details surrounding her arrest remain frustratingly vague. What we do know is that she had failed to appear in court on a misdemeanor theft charge, resulting in a warrant and a few days behind bars. On that sweltering July afternoon, she was released wearing a black skirt, carrying nothing but the hope of getting home to Minneapolis, an hour and a half away. A Steele County deputy drove JoJo from the jail to a Quick Trip convenience store on West Frontage Road. This was standard protocol, but it would be the last act of official assistance JoJo would ever receive. From that gas station, she began what should have been a simple journey home. JoJo called her sister Dolly immediately after her release, telling her she was on her way home. Those would be the last words her family would ever hear from her. Between 2:30 and 3 p.m., witnesses spotted JoJo walking in front of Mills Fleet Farm, just a few miles from the Quick Trip. She was alone, moving with purpose, probably trying to figure out how to get back to Minneapolis. Then, in broad daylight, on a busy frontage road, something happened that would change everything. An unidentified individual was seen walking up to JoJo. They began talking. The two walked away together. Multiple sources described this person as an unknown white male. And just like that, JoJo Boswell vanished from existence. But here's where this story becomes truly disturbing. When JoJo's sister Dolly tried to report her missing, she was told to wait 48 hours. Think about that for a moment. A 19-year-old woman disappears after being seen with a stranger, and law enforcement's response is to wait. When Dolly returned after the mandatory 48-hour waiting period, she encountered a bureaucratic nightmare, a dispute between Owatonna police and Minneapolis police over who had jurisdiction. Valuable information and evidence was lost in that initial 48 hours and the days following while police departments fought over responsibility. The golden hours when JoJo might have been found alive slipped away while agencies argued over paperwork. Nearly 20 years have passed, and JoJo Boswell remains missing. She would be 39 years old today. Her case has received virtually no media attention, no billboards, no television specials, no podcast series. An internet search produces her picture on missing person websites, but not a single news story can be found from July 2005, when she disappeared. If you're feeling that surge of emotion right now, that mixture of anger and sadness, you're not alone. This story should outrage you. But before we go further, I need you to do something. If you care about justice for JoJo, if you believe every missing person deserves attention regardless of their race or background, hit that subscribe button. Because cases like JoJo's don't get solved by staying silent. They get solved when people like you demand answers. JoJo's family believes that race played a significant role in the lack of media coverage surrounding her disappearance. Recent studies have shown that numerous police departments nationwide are not adequately identifying or reporting cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. According to the Minnesota Department of Public Safety, 10% of all missing women in Minnesota in 2024 were Indigenous, despite making up just 1% of the state population. These aren't just statistics. These are daughters, sisters, mothers, friends. JoJo was all of these things. She loved drawing, dancing, and music. She frequented 31st Avenue and 4th Avenue in Minneapolis before her disappearance. Her sister Dolly said it was completely out of character for JoJo to disappear without contact because she checked in with her family daily. Their mother, Geraldine Jackson, shared a touching memory of JoJo as a baby eating green beans for the first time, getting food all over her high chair, face, and hair. Jackson's words haunt with their simplicity. She just misses being able to give her daughter a hug and tell her she loves her. The investigation into JoJo's disappearance reveals troubling gaps. Few details are available about her case. We don't know who the unidentified person was who approached her. We don't know what they talked about. We don't know why JoJo chose to walk away with this stranger. Was she offered help? Was she forced? These fundamental questions remain unanswered after nearly 2 decades. Despite Owatonna being a small town of approximately 26,000 people, nobody has come forward to identify the stranger JoJo was seen talking to. In a community that small, someone knows something. Someone saw something. Someone is keeping quiet about what happened to JoJo Boswell. The Minneapolis Police Department continues to investigate JoJo's disappearance. JoJo's family has provided DNA samples, but there has never been a match with unidentified remains. She is listed as case number MP5197 in NamUs, the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, with 3 exclusions already processed. But here's what makes this case even more significant today. In recent years, Minnesota has taken steps to address the crisis of missing and murdered Indigenous women. JoJo's story was specifically mentioned during legislative proceedings that led to the creation of a Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Task Force. Her sister Dolly and mother Geraldine have become advocates, carrying signs and trying to raise awareness at events like the Women's Memorial March. The statistics surrounding violence against Native American women are staggering. According to the FBI and U.S. Department of Justice, within Indian country, nearly half of all Native women, 46%, have experienced rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner. On some reservations, Native women are murdered at a rate more than 10 times the national average, often by non-natives. JoJo's case represents more than just one missing person. It represents a pattern of systemic failure that continues to this day. The delays in accepting her missing person report, the jurisdictional disputes, the lack of media coverage, the absence of public awareness campaigns, all of these factors contributed to a case going cold when it should have remained hot. As one online observer noted about the case, "I find it hard to believe in a Midwestern town of 26,000, nobody knew the stranger she was seen talking to or knew where JoJo went." This sentiment captures the frustration that anyone following this case must feel. In 2005, Owatonna wasn't a massive metropolitan area where people could easily disappear. It was a community where faces were familiar and strangers stood out. The timeline of that final day haunts with its specificity. 2:36 p.m. JoJo released from jail. Shortly after, driven to Quick Trip. 2:33 p.m. Seen walking near Mills Fleet Farm. Then nothing. In less than 30 minutes, a young woman's life changed forever, and no one knows how or why. What makes this disappearance particularly chilling is its randomness. JoJo wasn't involved in dangerous activities. She wasn't meeting someone she knew to be threatening. She was simply trying to get home after a minor legal issue, the kind of situation thousands of people find themselves in every day. The fact that she could vanish so completely in such ordinary circumstances should terrify us all. The investigation's limitations become more apparent when you consider what we don't know. Was the unidentified person waiting for JoJo specifically, or was this a chance encounter? Had they been watching the jail for releases? Were they local to Owatonna or just passing through? Did anyone else see this interaction? These basic investigative questions seem to have gone unanswered, or worse, uninvestigated. If this case is affecting you the way it should, if you're feeling that need for justice that drives all of us who follow true crime, then I need you to share this story. Hit that like button if you think JoJo Boswell deserves justice. Share this with someone who cares about missing persons cases. Because awareness is the first step toward answers, and answers are what JoJo's family has been waiting for since 2005. Detective Jim Sandberg of the Minneapolis Police Department, who has worked JoJo's case, stated that everybody has questions about her whereabouts. Obviously, after so many years, you probably tend to believe it's not a good outcome, but there are still questions out there about what happened to JoJo Boswell. Those questions remain as urgent today as they were 20 years ago. What happened during those final moments near Mills Fleet Farm? Who was the person who approached JoJo? Where did they go? Is JoJo still alive somewhere? Or did she become another victim of violence against Indigenous women? The case of JoJo Boswell forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about whose disappearances matter in our society. It challenges us to examine how systemic racism affects not just the initial response to missing persons cases, but the long-term commitment to finding answers. It demands that we acknowledge the epidemic of violence against Native American women that continues largely invisible to mainstream America. JoJo's mother, Geraldine Jackson, still holds on to hope. saying that her daughter was only 19 and would just be beginning her life. She was just starting out, just a child who needs to come back so she can live and grow and be with her family. That hope, maintained across nearly 2 decades of silence, represents the strength of families who refuse to let their loved ones be forgotten. It represents the power of mothers who will never stop looking, never stop believing, never stop demanding justice. Today, JoJo would be approaching 40 years old. She might have had children of her own, a career, dreams fulfilled. Instead, she remains frozen in time at 19, walking toward an unknown fate on a summer afternoon in Minnesota. Her family remains frozen too, unable to move forward without answers, unable to grieve properly without closure. The investigation continues, though progress has been minimal. But information requires memory, and memory fades after 20 years. Witnesses move away, die, or simply forget details that seemed insignificant at the time. This is why cold cases matter. This is why we must continue telling these stories, continue demanding answers, continue refusing to let victims be forgotten. JoJo Boswell deserves better than silence. She deserves better than being a footnote in missing persons databases. She deserves the full attention of law enforcement, media, and society. The technology available today offers new possibilities for solving old cases. DNA analysis has advanced dramatically since 2005. Surveillance systems are more comprehensive. Social media can spread awareness faster than ever before. Database matching has improved, yet none of these advances help if a case lacks the resources, attention, and commitment necessary to pursue them. JoJo's case also highlights the importance of immediate action in missing persons investigations. The 48-hour waiting period that delayed the initial report, the jurisdictional disputes that followed, the lack of immediate media attention. These factors created a cascade of lost opportunities that may have sealed JoJo's fate. Every missing person case teaches us something about the systems designed to protect us. JoJo's case teaches us that those systems often fail the most vulnerable members of our society. It teaches us that bias, whether conscious or unconscious, affects every aspect of criminal justice. It teaches us that some voices are heard while others are silenced, but it also teaches us about resilience, about families who refuse to give up, about communities that eventually acknowledge their failures and work to do better, about the power of storytelling to keep memories alive and demand accountability. As we conclude this examination of JoJo Boswell's disappearance, we're left with more questions than answers. But those questions matter. They represent a young woman who mattered, a family that continues to grieve, and a system that must do better. If you've stayed with this story until the end, you understand its importance. You understand that JoJo Boswell wasn't just another missing person statistic. She was a daughter, a sister, a young woman with dreams and fears and hopes for the future. She was someone who drew pictures, loved to dance, and called her sister every day. 20 years of silence is enough. 20 years of unanswered questions is enough. 20 years of a family wondering what happened to their daughter is enough. Subscribe to this channel if you believe stories like JoJo's deserve to be told. Like this video if you think her case deserves renewed attention. Share it if you think someone somewhere might have information that could finally bring answers to the Boswell family. Because somewhere out there, someone knows what happened to JoJo Boswell on July 11, 2005. Someone saw something. Someone heard something. Someone has been carrying this secret for 20 years. It's time for that silence to end. It's time for JoJo to come home, one way or another. It's time for justice, delayed but not denied. The search for JoJo Boswell continues. The questions remain. The hope endures. And somewhere in Owatonna, Minnesota, the truth waits to be discovered. Remember her name, JoJo Boswell. Remember her face. Remember her story. Because a voice that was silenced 20 years ago deserves to be heard again. This is her story. This is her family's pain. This is our collective failure and our opportunity to do better. JoJo Boswell, missing since July 11, 2005. Still waiting for answers. Still waiting for justice. Still waiting to come home. 8 in the morning. A young man steps out of a house near Wally's Bar in King, Wisconsin. He's wearing a black Nike hoodie, blue jeans, and carrying a drawstring backpack. He tells the people inside he's walking home. That was March 6, 2020. John Jacob Morgan Jr., known to everyone as Jake, has never been seen again. 5 years later, his family still doesn't know what happened in those crucial moments after he walked out that door. Detective Captain Nicholas Traeger with the Waupaca County Sheriff's Department has been working this case since the beginning. In his 19 years on the force, he's never encountered a missing person case quite like this one. The question that haunts everyone involved is simple, yet devastating. How does a 22-year-old man vanish without a trace in broad daylight from a small Wisconsin community where everyone knows everyone? Let me take you back to the beginning. To understand what happened to Jake Morgan, we need to understand who he was and the events that led to that fateful morning. Jake was described by his mother Michelle as great fun, crazy at times, always active in sports, and very energetic in everything he did. His father John remembered him as someone who pushed everything to the extreme, breaking bone after bone after bone from his adventurous lifestyle. But Jake wasn't just an adrenaline junkie. He was a son, a brother, a friend who stayed in constant contact with the people who mattered to him. Jake worked at an AW restaurant in Wautoma and didn't drive, relying on others for transportation. He had a close relationship with a woman named Kim, who provided him with rides to work and even gave him a cell phone so they could communicate. While investigators couldn't definitively say they were dating, Detective Traeger noted that Kim seemed to be the closest person to Jake and was supposed to give him a ride to work that Friday morning. But Jake never contacted Kim that morning. And that's when everything started to unravel. The timeline of Jake's final known hours reads like a puzzle with missing pieces. On Thursday, March 5th, Jake finished his shift at the AW around 5:30 in the evening and got a ride home to Weyowega from Kim. Later that evening, he was picked up from his home by a former classmate investigators refer to as Haley. Now here's where the story takes a turn that investigators are still trying to fully understand. Jake was picked up from a residence in Waushara County during the early morning hours of Friday, March 6th, and traveled with 2 other individuals to a residence in King, Wisconsin. He was last known to be at this residence as of 8 a.m. that morning. King, Wisconsin is a tiny community. We're talking about a place where major news travels fast and secrets are hard to keep. The house where Jake was last seen sits near Wally's Bar, a local establishment that serves as a landmark in the area. Witnesses told law enforcement that Jake had traveled to the home with 2 other people and that he left on foot at about 8 a.m., leaving by himself. But here's what makes this case so perplexing. Jake was supposed to be at work that Friday morning. Kim was expecting to give him a ride, but Jake never contacted her. He never arrived at work and never picked up his paycheck. For someone who maintained regular contact with the people in his life, this was completely out of character. Jake's cell phone went straight to voicemail from that point forward, with no activity whatsoever. He hasn't appeared on any social media since March 6, 2020. In today's connected world, that kind of digital silence speaks volumes. If you're finding this case as puzzling as I am, and you want to see more deep investigations into missing person cases that law enforcement is still actively working on, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. These families deserve justice, and your support helps keep their stories alive when the world seems ready to forget. The initial search efforts were extensive. Waupaca County deputies conducted search warrants and large area searches throughout the region. A billboard was erected in the area advertising Jake's disappearance. His family created a Facebook page that posts monthly updates, encouraging people to come forward with information. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, the case grew cold, the leads dried up, the tips became rumors, and Jake's family was left with more questions than answers. Jake's father, John, described the emotional toll perfectly when he said that whether the information people send him are rumors or not, it just wrecks him again. His mother, Michelle, talks to someone in the sheriff's office weekly, maintaining hope while dealing with the limitations of an ongoing investigation that can't reveal much. The family has held vigils, maintained social media presence, and never stopped believing that someone out there knows something. In March 2021, on the first day of spring, family and friends gathered for a candlelight vigil in Weyawega, intentionally avoiding the anniversary date of March 6th. But what makes Jake's disappearance even more mysterious is what investigators discovered about his background and the circumstances surrounding that final night. Here's what most people don't know about Jake Morgan. He wasn't just a regular 22-year-old trying to make it in small-town Wisconsin. Jake had a history with law enforcement that may have played a crucial role in his disappearance. Detective Traeger revealed that Jake had an active probation warrant at the time he went missing. The investigators initially wondered if Jake might have been trying to avoid being arrested on this warrant. Could he have voluntarily disappeared to escape legal troubles? But as Traeger noted, they never found any credible information about where Jake might have gone if that were the case. Jake's criminal history included charges for operating while intoxicated, possession of methamphetamine, unsafe lane deviation, and operating with a suspended license. He had also been arrested for burglary in 2015. This background adds a layer of complexity to the investigation that can't be ignored. But here's where the case takes an even darker turn. Detective Traeger has stated that drugs continue to be a major challenge in working on Jake's case. As he put it, trying to speak with individuals who don't always like law enforcement or have been incarcerated doesn't always result in the most cooperation. This presents a troubling picture. Jake was last seen at a house in a small community where drug activity may have been present. He was with people who may not be eager to cooperate with law enforcement, and he had legal troubles that could have made him a target or motivated him to make dangerous decisions. The investigation eventually transferred from Washoe County to Waupaca County since King was Jake's last known location. This jurisdictional handoff is common in missing person cases, but it also means precious time and continuity can be lost in the crucial early stages of an investigation. What's particularly haunting about this case is how it reflects the challenges of investigating disappearances in communities affected by drug activity. Detective Traeger believes that information about Jake's disappearance will likely only come from a very select group of people. He thinks it's a very small circle, and his reasoning is compelling. In a small town like King, when something big happens, somebody usually knows something credible. But here's the frustrating reality. Throughout the last several years, there have been numerous interviews with people in the community who have heard rumors or information. Yet none of these interviews have produced much credible information from the people who were closest to the situation. This suggests either a conspiracy of silence or that the people who know what happened to Jake are too afraid, too loyal, or too implicated to come forward. The family's pain is evident in every public statement they've made. Jake's aunt has been particularly vocal on social media, posting regular updates that grow more desperate with each passing month. In one particularly heartbreaking post, she wrote about how it gets more and more difficult as the days, weeks, months, and years drag on without any answers. She specifically mentioned how Mother's Day has become an annual reminder of loss, with Jake's mother having to spend multiple Mother's Days without him and not knowing what happened to her son. The family's frustration with people who might have information is palpable. They've repeatedly stated that they know there are people out there who have information about what happened to Jake, and they pray that someone will finally come forward. Right now, take a second to think about Jake's mother, Michelle, spending yet another year not knowing if her son is alive or dead. If this story is affecting you the way it's affecting me, smash that like button to show this family that people care about finding answers. Your engagement could be the thing that gets this case in front of the right person who has the information law enforcement needs. But there's something else that makes this case even more compelling. The family has put their money where their mouth is. Jake's family is offering a $10,000 reward for information that leads to an arrest of anyone involved in Jake's disappearance, or for information that leads to finding him or the location of his body. $10,000 is serious money for a working-class family in Wisconsin. This isn't just about publicity or keeping the case alive. This family is willing to make a significant financial sacrifice to get answers about what happened to their son, brother, nephew. The reward money shows just how confident investigators are that this isn't a case of someone voluntarily disappearing. This is a family that believes someone harmed Jake, and they're willing to pay for justice. Detective Traeger's assessment of the case is particularly telling. He believes that credible information will come from a very small circle of people who were involved in or aware of what happened that night. The fact that this small town hasn't produced solid leads after 5 years suggests that the people who know something are actively choosing not to cooperate. This brings us to one of the most chilling aspects of the case. In August 2020, the family had to issue a statement clarifying that human remains found in Waupaca County were not Jake. The fact that they had to make this clarification shows how desperate they've become for any news, even tragic news, that might provide closure. The family wrote that they were sending love and prayers to the family of the person who was found, while asking for continued prayers for themselves. This level of grace under unimaginable circumstances speaks to the character of the people who are fighting for Jake. But what's really kept this case alive is the family's relentless advocacy. They've maintained an active Facebook page called Help Us Find John Jake Morgan that has over 5,000 followers. They post monthly updates, share news coverage, and consistently ask people to come forward with information. As recently as January 2025, 5 years after Jake's disappearance, the family shared a news report about the case, thanking people for their continued prayers and expressing that they continue to hope and pray for answers. The persistence of Jake's family is remarkable. Most missing person cases fade from public attention within months, but Jake's family has kept his story alive for 5 years, maintaining hope while dealing with a nightmare that never ends. What makes their advocacy even more powerful is their message to people who might have information. They consistently appeal to basic human empathy, asking people to think about how they would feel if this was their child, brother, nephew, cousin, or friend. The family has been clear in their messaging to anyone who might be involved in Jake's disappearance. As his aunt wrote in one social media post, they want people to know that the family will not stop until they find out what happened to him. This isn't just a family hoping for the best. This is a family that believes someone harmed Jake, and they're committed to finding out who and why. The case has taken on additional significance because it's not isolated. Other young men have gone missing in the same general area of Wisconsin, though authorities have not indicated any connection between the cases. Still, the pattern is troubling and suggests that there may be dangers in these small Wisconsin communities that haven't been fully recognized or addressed. One detail that investigators continue to focus on is Jake's distinctive appearance and the items he was carrying when he disappeared. Jake is 6 feet 1 inch tall, weighs between 140 and 160 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. He has a custom-made tattoo on his lower right leg that extends from ankle to knee and almost wraps around his leg. He has piercings in both ears and his tongue, and a half-inch star-shaped scar believed to be on his left eyebrow. When he disappeared, Jake was wearing a dark blue or black hooded sweatshirt with a Nike logo on the front, blue jeans, brown shoes, and a gray stocking cap. He was carrying a drawstring backpack and wearing a blue and gray jacket similar to a Columbia jacket. These details matter because Jake would be recognizable to anyone who encountered him. His height, build, distinctive tattoo, multiple piercings, and the specific clothing he was wearing would make him memorable to witnesses. The fact that no credible sightings have emerged suggests that whatever happened to Jake occurred quickly and in a location where he wouldn't be seen by potential witnesses. The investigation continues to this day. The Waupaca County Sheriff's Office asks anyone with information to call 715-258-4466. People can also make anonymous tips through Crime Stoppers at 888-258-9955 or through the P3 app available for Apple and Android devices. What's particularly important for people to understand is that investigators believe even seemingly minor information could be crucial. Detective Traeger has emphasized that the solution to this case will likely come from people who were part of a very small circle connected to that night in King, Wisconsin. Someone knows what happened to Jake Morgan. Someone knows why a 22-year-old man walked out of a house at 8 in the morning and never made it home. Someone knows whether Jake was hurt, where he might be, or what happened to his body. The question that remains after 5 years is simple. Will that person finally come forward? Jake would be 27 years old today. He's missed birthdays, holidays, family gatherings, and all the milestones of young adulthood. His family has endured 5 years of not knowing whether to mourn him or keep hoping for his return. Before you click away from this video, I want you to do something. Share this story. Comment below with your thoughts about what might have happened to Jake. And if you know anything about this case, anything at all, please contact the Waupaca County Sheriff's Office. This family deserves answers, and Jake deserves justice. Subscribe if you want to see more cases like this where we shine a light on the missing and the forgotten, because every person matters, and every family deserves the truth. This is the John Morgan mystery, a case that started with an 8 a.m. walk and has led to 5 years of silence. Until someone breaks that silence, Jake's family will continue their search for answers, and investigators will continue following every lead, no matter how small, because in the end, the truth always has a way of coming out. The question is just how long it will take, and whether the people who know that truth will find the courage to finally speak up. Jake Morgan is still missing. His case is still open, and somewhere out there, someone knows exactly what happened on that March morning in 2020. The clock is ticking for justice. April 13, 1994. 2 young boys walking home from school in Franklin, Indiana. They're doing what kids do, looking for aluminum cans to recycle for pocket change. They approach a trash can at Temple Park. What they find inside will haunt an entire community for over 3 decades. A newborn baby girl, stabbed multiple times, left to die like garbage. Today, I'm going to tell you about one of the most heartbreaking cold cases in American history. A case that seemed impossible to solve. A mystery that gripped a nation. And how in 2025, 31 years later, DNA technology finally gave this innocent child a name. This is the story of Baby Hope. The date was April 13th, 1994. Franklin, Indiana was your typical small American town. Population barely hitting 15,000. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where crime was rare, and where children could walk home from school without fear. But on this particular Wednesday evening, around 5 o'clock, that sense of safety was shattered forever. 2 boys, whose names were never released to protect their privacy, were making their way through Temple Park. They had developed a routine after school, searching through trash cans and recycling bins, collecting aluminum cans they could sell for a few dollars. It was honest work for kids trying to earn spending money. They approached a trash can near the park's recreation area. What they discovered inside would change their lives forever. A newborn infant, female, wrapped in what appeared to be clothing. But she wasn't moving, she wasn't breathing, and there was blood. The boys immediately ran to find help. Within minutes, Franklin Police Department officers arrived at the scene. What they found was beyond anything they had prepared for in their training. The infant had been brutally stabbed, multiple wounds. The coroner would later determine that she had died from these stab wounds shortly after birth. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't neglect. This was cold-blooded murder. But here's what made this case even more devastating. Nobody knew who she was. No missing person reports. No hospital records of a recent birth. No frantic parents searching for their child. This baby girl had lived and died in complete anonymity. The Franklin Police Department faced an impossible task. How do you investigate a murder when you don't even know the victim's name? How do you find suspects when you have no idea where to start looking? Detective work in 1994 was vastly different from today. No social media to track people's movements, no cell phone records to analyze, no security cameras on every street corner. DNA analysis existed, but it was expensive, time-consuming, and required substantial biological evidence to be effective. The investigators did what they could with the tools available. They canvassed the entire neighborhood around Temple Park. They interviewed residents, asking if anyone had heard anything unusual, seen any suspicious activity, or noticed a pregnant woman in the area. They expanded their search beyond Franklin. Maybe someone had traveled from another city or state to dispose of the evidence. They contacted hospitals within a 100-mile radius, checking for any records of recent births or women who had left without completing their stay. Every lead led nowhere. Every tip turned into another dead end. The investigation consumed hundreds of hours, involved multiple law enforcement agencies, and generated a case file that grew thicker by the week. But the community of Franklin refused to let this baby girl remain nameless and forgotten. Something beautiful emerged from this tragedy. The residents came together and decided that if no one else would claim this child, they would. They named her Baby Hope. The name wasn't chosen randomly. In a situation filled with darkness and despair, the community chose hope. Hope that someday, somehow, justice would be served. Hope that this innocent child would be remembered with dignity. Hope that her story would have meaning. Local businesses and residents organized fundraising efforts. They collected donations to ensure Baby Hope received a proper funeral and burial. She was laid to rest at Green Lawn Cemetery in Franklin, with a headstone bearing her chosen name and the dates that marked her brief existence. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people who had never met this child, but felt compelled to honor her memory. It was one of the most emotional services the community had ever witnessed. But the investigators weren't giving up. They preserved biological evidence from the crime scene, including DNA samples. In 1994, genetic analysis was still in its infancy, but they had faith that technology would eventually advance to the point where these samples might provide answers. Years passed. The case grew cold. New crimes demanded attention. Officers retired and were replaced by younger detectives who inherited case files full of unsolved mysteries. But Baby Hope was never forgotten. Every few years, someone would pull out the file, review the evidence, follow up on old leads, and hope for a breakthrough that never came. The 2000s brought advances in DNA technology. What once required large samples and weeks of processing could now be done with microscopic evidence in a matter of days. Cold cases across America were being solved using genetic evidence that had been considered worthless decades earlier. Franklin Police Department began revisiting their oldest unsolved cases, including Baby Hope. They submitted the preserved DNA samples for updated analysis, hoping that modern technology might finally provide the answers they had been seeking. But even with improved DNA processing, they faced a fundamental problem. DNA analysis can tell you a lot about a person, but it can't tell you their name. Unless you have something to compare it against, genetic evidence is just data without context. This is where the story takes an interesting turn. The rise of consumer genetic testing companies like 23andMe and Ancestry DNA created something that had never existed before. Massive databases of genetic information from ordinary people researching their family histories. But there was a problem. These commercial databases were private. Law enforcement couldn't simply access them without legal complications and privacy concerns. They needed a different approach. If you've made it this far, you're clearly invested in seeing how this decades-old mystery finally gets solved. The breakthrough that's coming will shock you, so make sure you're subscribed because we dive deep into cases like this that will keep you on the edge of your seat. The answer came in the form of public genetic databases. These were platforms where people voluntarily uploaded their DNA data and explicitly gave permission for law enforcement to use it for investigational purposes. The key difference was consent. Every person in these databases had specifically agreed that their genetic information could be used to help solve crimes. In 2019, Franklin Police Department made the decision to officially reopen Baby Hope's case. 25 years had passed since her murder, but advances in genealogical investigation techniques offered new possibilities. Detective work had evolved beyond traditional methods. Genetic genealogy combined DNA analysis with historical research, family tree construction, and detective work to identify individuals through their biological relatives. The process is complex but fascinating. Investigators take DNA evidence from a crime scene and compare it against public genetic databases. They're not looking for an exact match, which is unlikely unless the perpetrator or victim had previously submitted their DNA. Instead, they're looking for partial matches that indicate family relationships. When they find genetic relatives, they begin constructing family trees. They research birth records, death certificates, marriage licenses, and census data to map out how these relatives are connected. Through process of elimination and careful analysis, they can narrow down possibilities until they identify specific individuals. This technique had been used successfully in other high-profile cold cases. The Golden State Killer had been identified using similar methods after decades of investigation. Suddenly, cases that seemed impossible to solve were being cracked using combinations of old-fashioned detective work and cutting-edge genetic science. But Baby Hope's case presented unique challenges. They weren't just trying to identify a perpetrator. They were trying to identify the victim herself, and potentially her parents. This required even more complex genealogical research and analysis. The Franklin Police Department worked closely with the Indiana State Police Crime Lab and genetic genealogy experts. They began the painstaking process of uploading Baby Hope's DNA profile to public databases and searching for potential family connections. The work was slow and methodical. Each potential match had to be carefully researched. Family trees had to be constructed, going back multiple generations. Birth and death records had to be located and verified. It was like solving a massive puzzle where most of the pieces were missing. A white Chevrolet sits abandoned in one of the most unforgiving places on Earth, Death Valley. The car has been there for months, baking under the relentless desert sun. Inside, personal belongings remain untouched. But the driver? Nowhere to be found. This isn't just any missing person case. This is the story of Kelsey Pittman, a 33-year-old woman from North Carolina who disappeared without a trace, sparking one of the most extensive search operations California has seen in recent years. November 2024. Kelsey Pittman makes her last known contact with her family. She's somewhere in Utah, far from her North Carolina home. What happened next would puzzle investigators for 9 long months and leave a community of searchers asking one haunting question: how does someone simply vanish in the digital age? The story begins not with Kelsey's disappearance, but with a phone call that would change everything. February 9th, 2025. A concerned citizen contacts the Inyo County Sheriff's Office about a suspicious vehicle near an area locals call the Pads, or Slab City. This isn't your typical suburban neighborhood. Slab City is an off-the-grid community west of Death Valley National Park, where people go to disappear from society. It's a place where winter campers seek solitude, where cell towers don't reach, and where the nearest help is miles away. When deputies arrived at the scene, they discovered a 2009 Chevrolet HHR with North Carolina license plates. The registration came back to Kelsey Megan Pittman. But here's where the story takes its first mysterious turn. Despite searching the vehicle and combing through the surrounding desert terrain with park rangers, there was no sign of Kelsey anywhere. Think about that for a moment. Your car is found in the middle of nowhere, but you've completely vanished. No footprints leading away, no signs of struggle, no indication of where you might have gone. It's as if Kelsey Pittman had simply evaporated into the desert air. The investigation that followed reveals just how difficult it can be to report someone missing in our interconnected world. For months after finding the vehicle, deputies ran the license plates repeatedly, checking to see if Pittman had been reported as a missing person. Each inquiry came back negative. No missing person report existed. This wasn't negligence by law enforcement or family. This was the reality of a woman who had been living off the grid, maintaining minimal contact with the outside world. It wasn't until investigators tracked down Pittman's mother that the pieces began falling into place. The conversation was heartbreaking. Pittman's mother revealed that the last time anyone in the family had contact with Kelsey was back in November 2024. But even more concerning, the last official contact Kelsey had with anyone was with law enforcement in Utah that same month. After that, she had seemingly vanished from all records. The timeline is crucial here. Kelsey was last seen in St. George, Utah on December 2, 2024. Her car was found near Death Valley in February 2025, roughly 260 miles away. That's a significant distance through some of the most challenging terrain in the American Southwest. What happened during those months between her last sighting and the discovery of her vehicle remains one of the most puzzling aspects of this case. Death Valley isn't called Death Valley as a marketing gimmick. This is one of the hottest, driest, and most dangerous places in North America. Summer temperatures regularly exceed 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Even in winter, when Kelsey would have been traveling through the area, the desert presents countless dangers. Dehydration can kill in hours. Getting lost means almost certain death. The fact that her car was found in this location sent chills through the investigative team. But here's what makes this case even more compelling. The area where Kelsey's car was discovered, the Pads, or Slab City, has a unique culture. It's a community of people who've chosen to live outside conventional society. Some are there by choice, seeking freedom from modern life's constraints. Others are there because they have nowhere else to go. It's a place where people don't ask too many questions about your past, and anonymity is respected. When investigators began their search operation, they were dealing with more than just harsh desert conditions. They were navigating a community that values privacy and independence above all else. Getting information from residents who might have seen Kelsey required building trust with people who generally prefer to avoid law enforcement contact. The search effort that followed was nothing short of extraordinary. From February through June 2025, the Inyo County Sheriff's Office coordinated with multiple law enforcement agencies across several states. This wasn't just local deputies walking through the desert. This was a full-scale operation involving drone teams equipped with thermal imaging cameras, cadaver dog handlers trained to detect human remains in extreme conditions, and volunteer search and rescue crews familiar with Death Valley's unique challenges. Imagine the scope of this operation. Searchers covered hundreds of square miles of some of the most hostile terrain imaginable. They checked mine shafts, explored hidden canyons, and investigated every possible location where someone might seek shelter or where remains might be found. The aerial searches alone covered territory that would take ground teams months to explore on foot. During the investigation, more details about Kelsey emerged that painted a picture of someone who valued her privacy and independence. Her mother revealed to investigators that Kelsey sometimes used aliases, including Infinity Jane and Jane Jones. This wasn't necessarily suspicious behavior, but it highlighted how someone could move through society while maintaining anonymity, especially in communities like Slab City, where alternative identities are common. The physical description investigators worked with showed a woman who could blend into the transient community around Death Valley. Kelsey was described as a Caucasian female, 5 feet 5 inches tall, weighing approximately 130 pounds, with blonde or strawberry blonde hair and hazel eyes. In a community where people often change their appearance and avoid official documentation, finding someone matching this description became exponentially more difficult. As months passed without any breakthrough, the case began attracting national attention. Kelsey's information was entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System, known as NAMUS, in May 2025. This database helps connect missing person cases across jurisdictions and has been instrumental in solving cold cases nationwide. The fact that it took until May to get Kelsey's case into this system shows how complex missing person investigations can become when the missing individual has been living off the grid. The emotional toll on Kelsey's family during this period cannot be understated. Her mother traveled from North Carolina to California to assist with the search efforts near where the vehicle was found. Imagine making that journey, not knowing whether you're looking for your daughter alive or searching for closure. The uncertainty, the hope mixed with dread, the daily phone calls with investigators who had no new information to share. Throughout the summer of 2025, the search continued with decreasing intensity but unwavering determination. Investigators followed up on every tip, no matter how remote the possibility. They checked with hospitals, homeless shelters, and social services across multiple states. They coordinated with law enforcement agencies in Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and Nevada, following every possible lead about a woman matching Kelsey's description. Then, on July 22, 2025, everything changed with a single phone call. The Inyo County Sheriff's Office received information that would end 9 months of uncertainty and hundreds of hours of search efforts. Kelsey Pittman had been located. She was alive. She was in Colorado. After vanishing without a trace from one of America's most dangerous environments, after months of intensive searches that yielded no physical evidence, after her family feared the worst, Kelsey Pittman had been found safe. The announcement was as brief as it was shocking. The sheriff's office confirmed that Pittman had been located alive in Colorado, but provided no additional details about her condition, the circumstances of her discovery, or what had happened during the 9 months she was missing. Their statement was clear. Out of respect for her privacy and that of her family, no further details will be released. This resolution raises more questions than it answers. How did Kelsey survive nearly 9 months after disappearing from Death Valley? Where had she been during this time? How did she end up in Colorado? Was she there voluntarily, or were there circumstances beyond her control? The authorities' silence on these details is both frustrating and understandable, protecting a woman who has already been through an unimaginable ordeal. If you're finding this story as captivating as I am, and you want to stay updated on cases like this that challenge everything we think we know about missing persons investigations, make sure you're subscribed, because we dive deep into the mysteries that keep investigators awake at night. The Kelsey Pittman case represents something larger than one woman's disappearance and recovery. It highlights the challenges law enforcement faces when investigating missing persons who live outside conventional society. It demonstrates the incredible dedication of search and rescue volunteers who risk their own safety to find strangers in need. Most importantly, it reminds us that in an age of constant connectivity and digital surveillance, it's still possible for someone to completely disappear. The search for Kelsey Pittman involved dozens of agencies, hundreds of volunteers, and thousands of hours of work. The cost in resources alone was substantial, but the cost in emotional energy for her family and the community that rallied to find her was immeasurable. The fact that this story has a positive ending, that Kelsey was found alive and safe, is a testament to the power of persistence and the refusal to give up hope. As we reflect on this case, we're left with profound questions about privacy, independence, and the length society will go to find those who've disappeared. Kelsey's story is ultimately one of survival against incredible odds, though the details of that survival remain hidden out of respect for her wishes. The desert keeps its secrets, but sometimes, just sometimes, it gives back what seemed lost forever. Kelsey Pittman's 9-month disappearance will likely remain one of those mysteries that investigators discuss for years to come. Not because it wasn't solved, but because the solution raises questions that may never be fully answered. What we do know is that somewhere in Colorado, a family has been reunited. Somewhere, a woman who survived an ordeal we can barely imagine is beginning to rebuild her life. And somewhere in Death Valley, the desert wind continues to blow across the landscape where one of the most extensive missing person searches in recent memory took place. The case of Kelsey Pittman reminds us that every missing person represents a family in anguish, a community mobilized to help, and investigators who refuse to give up. It shows us that even in our modern world, people can still vanish completely, and sometimes, miraculously, they can return. Before we close this incredible story of survival and mystery, I want you to take a moment to think about the volunteers who spent months searching the brutal Death Valley terrain for someone they'd never met. Their dedication saved resources that could be used for other cases and gave a family hope when hope seemed lost. If stories like this move you, if they make you think about the incredible capacity humans have for helping strangers, then this channel is where you belong. Hit that subscribe button and join a community that believes every missing person matters, every family deserves answers, and every mystery deserves investigation. The Kelsey Pittman case is closed, but her story will continue to inspire search and rescue efforts for years to come. Sometimes the desert gives back its secrets. Sometimes families are reunited against all odds. And sometimes the most important victory isn't solving the mystery, but simply bringing someone home alive.